Hello everybody, ciao a tutti and welcome to Art with Ms.B. Today I'm particularly happy and grateful to have some time to spend together in this beautiful, relaxing and centering activity that I'm about to propose you. There are some days that might be a little harder and worse than other, right? Life, it's a little roller coaster. I want to say it's not always everything beautiful and positive. Sometimes we kind of struggle, and this is exactly what is happening to me right now. Therefore, because I'm a believer of the benefit of art and art practices, here I am sitting down with you and just spending some time in doing an art practice and exercise that will help me to reset, calm down, and just feel that embracement and the hope that I truly need. For this practice, you need your art journal or a piece of mixed media paper, a regular tip black Sharpie, a fine tip black Sharpie. I'm gonna use many tints and tones of green from my 121 box of Shuttle art markers. If you have another brand of alcohol markers, you feel free to use those. If you have just regular markers and maybe you don't have so many greens available, remember that you will find a light green, a dark green. Then you can also mix and overlap these two, obtaining a medium green. And then if you have a light gray, you can mix the light green and the dark green with the gray. So by two colors, you can have at least 5 different tones. I'm using green because definitely is a very peaceful and inspiring colors, and it brings somehow sort of a hope and openness. So it's exactly what I want to benefit myself with, and hopefully you will benefit from these two. So I'm gonna switch the camera and we can start. I will talk a little bit along the practice, and then I will have some time to quiet and silence so we can all center and focus on posture and breathing. Remember subscribing to my channel. Let me know how it goes in the comment. Let me know if you have any question in the comment, and I hope that this practice will benefit you as much as it's going to benefit me. Ciao. Okay guys, before we start, a quick review. This was the rule of third, right? It's when we imagine to divide our paper with this graph, like 2 vertical lines and 2 horizontal, and then we try to set the design in a way that the main elements would fall into the crossing points of these lines. And you see you have the trees over here. We talk about also the foreground, middle ground, and background. The foreground very close to us, bigger; middle ground just a little smaller; foreground very, very small. This one was instead the L rule of composition, when you can clearly see that is a sign like a L. So I put my object instead in the center. I put it on the left side. You can do it on either side, it doesn't matter. And it creates a beautiful balanced and harmonic piece. And then we add the value, and we did that watercolor. So here we are. This is our page. We're gonna do a different landscape, and we're gonna use the space by taking care of the triangle. So let's imagine that you have your triangle here. You can trace the super light lines if you wish to do so, or if you're able to imagine that here you have your triangle. So let's start by going with the line of the horizon. This time it's going to be lower than the other one that we did last time. Then we're going to set already kind of the background. So this one is going to be our middle ground, and then I'm going to do some mountains. Remember, when we do mountains, we're going to use segmented lines. We don't want to do triangular mountains because they don't look good, they don't look textured, they don't look realistic. Now we're going to rise up. So we have the peak in the center, like at the tip of our triangles, right? So we are bringing attention to that specific point. Then we go down. Always remember, is segmented lines. You can go up a little bit, but not too much. So it's not super symmetric, but we can still see the triangular shapes that we are creating. So the attention goes here, right? Now let's set some elements, such a few trees. We're not gonna do a complicated design because the emphasis is on the use of space and the triangular rule of composition. So for example, I'm gonna put maybe a beautiful big tree on my kind of foreground. So always segmented lines. I'm gonna set the branches. whatever you want to do, it's fine. And then I'm going to add leaves. Remember, we're using different type of strokes and scribble, right? So it's an optical illusion. We are not drawing leaf by leaf. It's a beautiful optical illusion created by strokes and different type of lines, right? Now this one is gonna be pretty big. We're gonna do some texture on the ground as well. And then we can develop other tree. You see, this tree is also central, so it supports this triangular rule of composition. Then we're gonna do probably another one here, because it's farther apart from the bottom of the paper. It's gonna be slightly smaller, so scribble in these lines, nothing fancy, nothing too difficult. Create some texture underneath the tree. And then once again, some foliage. This is scribbly line. At the beginning of my drawing class, the first exercise, the course, you know, the first exercise that we usually do is exercise different type of lines, such as a straight line, organic line, scribbly lines, because you see then they come, you know, they are very useful, right? Then we can start to add another one over here. We're gonna do it a tiny, like a smaller, and maybe we're gonna change the type of tree to create a little bit more variety. So we can kind of go, can do a pine tree or something. Some texture underneath the tree. Now we're gonna add, because we are here already, we can start to add some value and some more texture. So as you notice, I'm using usually like a 2B, which is soft. If you only have an HB, which is the common drawing pencil, you can definitely use that. Your lines would be lighter. Therefore, when you have to shade with value, you just have to be a little more persistent, right? And go a little more over. When you have like, you can also use a very light pencil such as 2H, H, or HB to set the sketch. So you have a very light lines that you can always change and correct. And then you switch to a B, 2B, 4B for the shading, because of course the softer is the graphite inside, so the softer is the pencil, the easier is for us to shade. I'm barely adding any pressure. I'm basically just coloring because I want to set the value with the pencil, just in case some of you want to leave the design black and white because you like a black and white drawing and you don't want to fulfill with color. I want to add some darkness over here on the roots, a little more over here. And then I'm going to switch to the other one. Definitely the branches will be pretty dark. Then if you want, for example, a sunset, you know that everything will be pretty dark, right? Because the sunset is so bright and luminous that will alter the color palette or whatever stand between us and the sunset. You see, by adding some value, it's already like more dynamic, more alive, more realistic, right? And then we can texture a little more the ground. It's like they are gentle scribble. I'm gonna start to go over the line of the horizon where I will work. And then because this one is definitely very far, all the vegetation, like the plants and the trees that we stand on this line of the horizon will be very way smaller than this, definitely, and way smaller than these two as well. It's a beautiful transition that we can add, we can have to enhance basically the three-dimensionality of the piece. Once again, remember, everything is inside this imaginary triangle, and so the eyes of the viewer will go and the attention will go there. So we are emphasizing a couple of other trees like that, you know. I'm basically once again doing tiny little lines. Look what I do. I do a line, I do another one, and then I go with horizontal strokes. Then I'm gonna add some scribbles to represent some bushes. A little bit more tree over here, maybe one different. One. And then you can add some strokes. If you want to have some grass, of course, the closest we are to the bottom of the page, the more details we can have. So you can do as many as you want. Now we're gonna texture a little bit the mountains, right? So we're gonna go with this type of like a very sketchy type of lines and scribble. We're gonna color some mountains. I would dark them up because probably I wanna do maybe just right before sunset or after sunset. So nice, warm, bright sky. Therefore, I want my mountains to be pretty dark. So pretend that you get to color with the pencil, just you're not coloring like we do with markers, we're not fulfilling the whole area, we are leaving some gaps, right? We are leaving some scribble, we change the direction, so we kind of represent a little better the texture of the mountains. And the texture, we want it to be rough, right? We don't want it to be perfect, that we can go over and dark up some area again. So remember, when we set the value, we start little by little. We want to make sure that we leave some point entirely light, and then some area instead way darker, because we want to represent the full scale of gray. Gonna do like this so you can see what I'm doing better. It's not super comfortable for me, but I put almost all the graphite out so I can keep my hands as far as possible, and you can see as well as possible the way that I'm scribbling and I'm adding this gray. This is like, remember when we do mountains, this is the type of line that we want to see. We don't want to have anything that is perfect, right? Or too geometric, because otherwise it will look very natural, very fake. I know that when we are kids or when we start and we are beginner, we tend to have these perfect triangular mountains, but then little by little, when we know more and better, we understand that it's not the way to do it. Of course, for a kindergarten, first grade, and maybe second, it's okay. But then when we started to practice more art, and we understand the way that we can use lines and the way that we can use strokes, right? We also understand that we want something that looks more like a rough, natural. Creating this variation and this scribble also kind of, you know, because the mountains might have different peak, right? This is the tallest one, but then maybe here there are others, and then here and here. So doing this will allow us also to differentiate a little bit the surface of the mountains and make them more like, as we say, realistic, interesting. This is also a beautiful exercise if you get a chance to go for a hike. Now that you know how you can use the space in your journal or on your paper to create a beautiful and harmonic landscape, you can actually do it from real observation, by observing the way that the mountains feel, by making your changes, because remember, we do not have to copy what we see, we can interpret it. I feel that there is so much more value in when you interpret a scene, when you interpret something, compared to when you just try to replicate it exactly as it is. Now I'm going to dark up the tree a little bit because I don't want it to blend too much with the mountain. And when we will do the color, it will make way more sense. And as I told you at the beginning, I'm not going to add too many details to this landscape because I do not want to make this practice super long, but most of all, I want to focus on the rule of composition. So when we start and we add way too many elements, then unfortunately we distract ourselves from the purpose of this drawing exercise. First of all, I want them to be beginner, intermediate friendly. So I don't want them to be intimidating. I'm trying my best to represent in front of you all the different steps and the way that I use my pencil and the way that I set the strokes. This one could be a nice rocks. We can add some rocks if you want. So you do this sort of like still organic shapes, and then we can color. We can add another rocks over here, and then one maybe the back, and then you color them. Once again, we are not coloring plain, but we are leaving instead gaps. We are leaving very evident strokes. We're gonna add the very nice cast of shadow here. We're gonna dark the shadow of the tree, which is the cast of shadow, so the shadow that they will reflect. Also because if the light is behind them, of course they will be pretty dark overall, and most of all the ground around them and underneath them will be pretty dark. A few last touches over here, and I feel that you can keep adding value, and you can keep adding, you can keep doing you if you want to add the extra texture. I'm gonna dark up this tree again, and it is ready. Now we want watercolors. I'm gonna start from the sky, and as I told you, I want something nice and warm. So I'm gonna add some yellow for sure. And then some I'm gonna use it with a lot of water because I want something really blendable. I don't want to control it too much. So I'm gonna just dip the brush in the water on the color, and again in the water. I'm gonna set my first coat of watercolor, this beautiful bright yellow. It will dry pretty quickly. And I'm gonna let it set. Now I'm going to do some mountains, and remember that because we have a sunset behind, the color of the mountain will be altered, so you don't have to do green or brown or something like that. Instead, I would probably do a blue and with some purple in, sort of an indigo color. Yep. Because when the next time that you are outside observing the mountains, maybe during or just right before sunset, immediately after as well, you can notice that the mountains feature some blue purplish color. Go around the trees. Don't worry if you go a little bit inside. We're gonna color them after, and make sure that if you're doing the same technique that I'm using, your brush is very wet. So after you pick the color, you can pick again the water, dip it in the water again, so it's really nice and wet, and the color it's not too dark, because as we say, we already did the drawing, we already did the work. We are now touching to make it look prettier, and also learn something about colors, right? That is always something that we can learn. Now I'm gonna pick just a little bit of purple only, and I'm going to go over some of the spots that I truly want a little darker. Now I'm gonna set the sun green, and I will go pretty dark again, because overall we want it to be pretty dark, so very like a blended, watery. Just go to give it a little bit of color. If you want to do the color with the coloring pencil, of course, it's gonna take way longer. It's gonna be beautiful, of course. Now I'm gonna use a very light beige brown just to add some colors on the rocks over here, just to create a little bit of variety and a little bit of light that we can still see, right? Trust the process, the watercolor will dry and then the color will assess. Now probably I'm gonna switch to a smaller brush and I'm going to go for a lighter green, brighter, want something different. Still the trees, because we blend them and we shade them at the beginning, they will be pretty dark. So don't worry about now it's gonna look like a blob of green. Perfect. It's okay. Trust the process. Keep spreading your green. And then remember that once it will assess and dry, it will light up. Switching on the lighter green because I don't want it to look too, you know, all the same. Some nice variation. And here we can just blend the color now a little more. Now we're gonna do the same, just lighter over here. Color tend to be also darker and more intense close to the background, and they tend to be lighter and a little less intense and less saturated way in the background. I'm gonna touch with this green some of the bushes in here. I'm gonna repeat some color, touch the bushes over here instead. Go over this little scribble with the green, tree with the green. Now one final, for this one, gently brush it on top. This overall is gonna be pretty dark. Let's go with the brown, nice and dark. We can go over the branches. And as I say, don't worry, because once the watercolor will dry, they will show back the pencil. A dark up on the bottom. Little bit, I want to dark up the rocks just to make them stand from the rest of the ground. And then finally, if you have the willing and the patience to do so, this time with a little bit of water, because we want the color to be controlled and not to expand, you can do some nice tiny little strokes with your brush to color the grass. So wet the brush, pick the color, not too much water, and then you will go. It's to be very, you know, something relaxed and sketchy, nothing too perfect. You can add a few more coming out from the rocks over here, whatever you feel like, and then you can clean your brush, the bottom. Now, the yellow is dry. I'm gonna pick a very nice light pink. So it's like almost a peach skin color. And here we want it instead to be really, really, really watery. So I'm gonna go on top of the yellow, which is now dry, and I barely touch the paper, so very little pressure overall, and a lot of like water. And then I'm going to spoil basically this yellow with some pink. There could also be some clouds, you know. And if you want to know that with the light, you might not see it because there is a little bit of the reflection of the water on the camera, but it's warming up very nicely. If you want to warm it up, you can also have some orange and dark it up, maybe just slightly around the peak once again, to help with colors also to still grab the attention of this triangle. So in this practice, we are learning again fine motor skills, basic drawing skills, the use of space, foreground, middle ground, and background, triangular rule of composition, and how to use the space properly. And at the same time, if you're doing the same brushing and coloring, we're learning also something about the watercolor and how they work. I'm going to add just like a warmer light violet on the mountains, just to have a little more transitions with colors over here, because I don't want it to look all the same. The more the better. And some nice and I can warm up gently also the mountain as the reflection of the warm sky. And now you let it dry properly, and then you can put it away. Hopefully you're holding all of this drawing in a nice folder. So rule of third, L rule of composition, triangle rule of composition, and we're gonna do a few more in the future. Please let me know in the comment how it goes. Do your practice. You can change stuff. Don't worry, you can review the video, pause it as many times as you need. Do you and go to your own pace, and I see you very soon with another practice.